Okay, so I noticed YouTube's just kind of, maybe it's the integration. Something's kind of garbage here. But I do have here. Let's start. I'm gonna do something a little bit different. I'm just checking to make sure that I am live. I am. It's very laggy. Holy crap. Something with OBS Studio is off, I've noticed. Yeah, this is irritating to me. Anyway, let's... Excellent connection. Yeah, right. I need to... Anyway, yeah, I'm going to... This time, I'm going to stand, I'm going to move. Yeah, I got my mouse with me, and I'm going to... What I'm going to do is I've got my... And I've got to... Dang. That'll work. Yeah, I've got... Oh, this isn't gonna work. The Origin of Species. By... So we're gonna do the Origin of Species. I'm going to... I guess I'm gonna have to do a lot of alt-tabbing. This is going to irritate me. But I'm gonna do a reading for a time. Yeah, I can. Okay, I'm just setting up a little bit here for actual streaming because it's not big enough for me to read. The Origin of Species by... So the first topic is Ancient Wisdom and the Evolution of Ancient Wisdom. I'm going to cover this by starting, but we're going to start with the Origin of Species, commentary on the Origin of Species and the implications of the document on human evolution. I really should be recording this with better recording. You know what? I'm going to set up my microphone, and I'm going to also just take a moment here to set it up because YouTube's quality is garbage. This mic's quality is garbage. YouTube, the internet here is not good enough, or there's something going on with quality concerns for me, and I'm unable to. I found myself unable to hook up. I was going to use Discord and transmit this proper mic and use the video from transmit it to my laptop through Discord and then transmit that. But I've found I've got issues with that. But wait, yeah, I'm going to record myself with my phone with this microphone. I do have a better mic to use, but this will do for now. Ad hoc. Okay, I'll just let you see my setup for recording. So I've got it recording here. It's kind of pulled in. Alt tab. So, hey, starting at 5 minutes, I will start reading. We'll do a reading, then a discussion. And we'll go up to 30 minutes. Maybe read for 10 minutes, discuss for 5 or 15. The ultimate, I've got up to 4 today. The ultimate goal will be 6 hours, 10 different presentations. I need to set up a key binding or something for this to go up properly. And 5 minutes in, this is just for my personal time tracking. This is on the Origin of Species, or the Preservation of Favored Races Through Natural Selection by Charles Darwin. This version doesn't have the proper title. You know, don't want to create too much to cut. Introduction. When on board the HMS Beagle as naturalist, I was much struck with certain facts in the distribution of the inhabitants of South America, and in the geological relations of the present to past inhabitants of that continent. These facts seem to me to throw some light on the origin of species, that mystery of mysteries, as it has been called by one of our greatest philosophers. On my return home, it occurred to me in 1837 that something might perhaps be made out on this question by patiently accumulating and reflecting on all sorts of facts which could possibly have any bearing on it. After 5 years' work, I allowed myself to speculate on the subject and drew up some short notes. These I enlarged in 1844 into a sketch of the conclusions, which then seemed to be probable. From that period to the present day, I have steadily pursued the same object. I hope that I may be excused for entering on these personal details, as I give them to show that I have not been hasty in coming to a decision. My work is now nearly finished, but it will take me 2 or 3 more years to complete it. And as my health is far from strong, I've been urged to publish this abstract. I have more especially been induced to do this as Mr. Wallace, who is now studying the natural history of the Malay archipelago, has arrived at almost exactly the same general conclusions that I have on the origin of species. Last year he sent me a memoir on this subject, with a request that I would forward it to Sir Charles Lyell, who sent it to the Linnean Society, and it is published in the 3rd volume of the Journal of that society. Sir C. Lyell and Dr. Hooker, who both knew of my work, the latter having read my sketch of 1844, honored me by thinking it advisable to publish, with Mr. Wallace's excellent memoir, some brief extracts from my manuscripts. This abstract, which I now publish, must necessarily be imperfect. I cannot here give references and authorities for my several statements, and I must trust to the reader reposing some confidence in my accuracy. No doubt errors will have crept in, though I hope I have always been conscious and trusting to good authorities alone. I can here give only the general conclusions at which I have arrived, with a few facts and illustrations, but which, I hope, in most cases will suffice. No one can feel more sensible than I do of the necessity of hereafter publishing in detail all the facts, with references on which my conclusions have been grounded. And I hope in a future work to do this, for I am well aware that scarcely a single point is discussed in this volume in which facts cannot be adduced, often apparently leading to conclusions directly opposite to those at which I have arrived. A fair result can be obtained only by fully stating and balancing the facts and arguments on both sides of each question, and this cannot possibly be here done. I must much regret that want of space prevents my having the satisfaction of acknowledging the generous assistance which I have received from very many naturalists, some of them personally unknown to me. I cannot, however, let this opportunity pass without expressing my deep obligations to Mr. Hooker, who, for the last 15 years, has aided me in every possible way by his large stores of knowledge and his excellent judgment. In considering the origin of species, it is quite conceivable that as naturalists, reflecting on the mutual affinities of organic beings, on the embryological relations, the geographical distribution, geological succession, and other such facts, might come to the conclusion that each species had not been independently created, but had descended like varieties from other species. Nevertheless, such a conclusion, even if well-founded, would be unsatisfactory until it could be shown how the innumerable species inhabiting this world have been modified, so as to acquire that perfection of structure and co-adaptation which most justly excites our admiration. Naturalists continually refer to external conditions, such as climate, food, as the only possible cause of variation. In one very limited sense, as we shall hereafter see, this may be true, but it is preposterous to attribute to mere external conditions the structure, for instance, of the woodpecker, with its feet, tail, beak, and tongue, so admirably adapted to catch insects under the bark of trees. In the case of the mistletoe, which draws its nourishment from certain trees, which has seeds that must be transported by certain birds, and which has flowers with separate sexes absolutely requiring the agency of certain insects to bring pollen from one flower to the other, it is equally preposterous to account for the structure of this parasite with its relation to several distinct organic beings by the effects of external conditions or of habit, or of the volition of the plant itself. The author of Vestiges of Creation would, I presume, say that after a certain unknown number of generations, some bird had given birth to a woodpecker and some plant to the mistletoe, and that these had been produced perfect as we now see them. But this assumption seems to me to be no explanation, for it leaves the case of the co-adaptations of organic beings to each other and to their physical conditions of life untouched and unexplained. It is, therefore, of the highest importance to gain a clear insight into the means of modification and to co-adaptation. At the commencement of my observations, it seemed to me probable that a careful study of domesticated animals and of cultivated plants would offer the best chance of making out this obscure problem. Nor have I been disappointed. In this and in all other perplexing cases, I have invariably found that our knowledge, imperfect though it be, of variation under domestication, afforded the best and safest clue. I may venture to express my conviction of the high value of such studies, although they have been very commonly neglected by naturalists. From these considerations, I shall devote the first chapter of this abstract to variation under domestication. We shall thus see that a large amount of hereditary modification is at least possible, and, what is equally or more important, we shall see how great is the power of man in accumulating, by his selection, successive slight variations. I will then pass on to the variability of species in the state of nature, but I shall, unfortunately, be compelled to treat this subject far too briefly, as it can be treated properly only by giving long catalogues of facts. We shall, however, be enabled to discuss what circumstances are most favorable to variation. In the next chapter, the struggle for existence amongst all organic beings throughout the world, which inevitably follows from the high geometrical ratio to their increase, will be treated of. This is the doctrine of Malthus, applied to the whole animal and vegetable kingdoms. As many more individuals of each species are born than can possibly survive, and as consequently there is a frequently recurring struggle for existence, it follows that any being, if it vary however slightly in any manner profitable to itself under the complex, sometimes varying conditions of life, will have a better chance of surviving, and thus be naturally selected. From the strong principle of inheritance, any selected variety will tend to propagate its new and modified form. This fundamental subject of natural selection will be treated at some length in the fourth chapter, and we shall see how natural selection almost inevitably causes much extinction of the less improved forms of life, and leads to what I have called divergence of character. In the next chapter I shall discuss the complex and little known laws of variation, and of correlation of growth. In the four succeeding chapters, the most apparent and gravest difficulties of the theory will be given, namely, first, the difficulties of transitions, or an understanding of how simple being or a simple organ can be changed and perfected into a highly developed being or elaborately constructed organ. Secondly, the subject of instinct, or the mental powers of animals. Thirdly, hybridism, or the infertility of species and the fertility of varieties then intercrossed. And fourthly, the imperfection of the geological record. In the next chapter I shall consider the geological succession of organic beings throughout time. In the 11th and 12th, the geographical distribution throughout space. In the 13th, their classification or mutual affinities, both when mature and in embryonic condition. In the last chapter I shall give a brief recapitulation of the whole work, and including remarks, and a few concluding remarks. No one ought to feel surprised at much. No one ought to feel surprised at much remaining as yet unexplained in regard to the origin of species and varieties. If he makes due allowance for our profound ignorance in regard to the mutual relations of all beings which lived around us, who can explain why one species ranges widely and is very numerous, and why another allied species has a narrow range, and why another allied species has a narrow range and is rare. Yet these relations are of the highest importance, for they determine the present welfare, and as I believe, the future success and modification of every inhabitant of this world. Still less do we know of the mutual relations of the innumerable inhabitants of the world during the many last geological epochs in history. Although much remains obscure and will long remain obscure, I can entertain no doubt, after the most deliberate study and dispassionate judgment of which I am capable, that the view which most naturalists entertain, and which I formerly entertained, namely, that each species has been independently created, is erroneous. I am fully convinced that species are not immutable, that those belonging to what are called the same genre are lineal descendants of some other and generally extinct species. In the same manner as acknowledged varieties of any one species are the descendants of that species. Furthermore, I am convinced that the natural selection has been main, but not exclusive means of modification. Okay, I'm going to stop there for now. For today, at the very least. So, I guess this is my treatise on it. My mic fell. This isn't good for my recording afterwards. This probably isn't the first time I'm going to orate the origin of species. I know I made a few mistakes. I'm not really good at reading aloud, I guess. In any case, so how does this pertain to ancient wisdom? The same concepts and principles also apply to information that humans have developed and that has been of value to the people who used that information and the groups that used it. Much like an individual organism that develops a modification of some with some organ, some part of its being, the information we use for wisdom and for teaching and for guiding us also is under pressures of natural selection. The piece of wisdom that somebody uses that leads bad advice, the piece of wisdom, the bad wisdom, will be outcompeted by better wisdom. This will, for oral tradition, this will be folklore, traditions that are more mutable and that change more fluidly. The hard set skeleton structure, so this would be the church, the organic rituals and traditions, the community, the culture. Those are and over time, the more solid parts of them that become fundamental, like the hand. A human that reverses the hand, well, maybe nowadays a hand could become distinct, but throughout history, the hands, the individual piece has become essential to our being. Some organs we develop, and it's the same with wisdom and strategies. The golden rule for a group, it's like a hand for the individual. You need your hands, at the very least for now, until a different environment occurs, and it becomes vestigial. Everyone needs their hands. Like this, the group needs certain traditions and like congregating together. We congregate together. You need it at the very least to find a mate and reproduce. The church facilitates this, and the ancient wisdom that is fundamentally dictates that outwards is of extreme value. And I would suggest the Bible is to the group what the hand is to the individual. I would say the Bible is also that to the individual for our wisdom and knowledge of behaviors, as it says the strategies that have maximum value for the individual and the group. And the origin of species, you can apply the same precepts and ridicule and judgment to all things in life. It is excellent, I believe, to look at our wisdom and knowledge with the same lens, the same scrutiny, looking for, okay, what's the value there? Is that environmentally dependent? Like baseball analogies. When everyone used to play baseball, a lot of people my parents met on a recreational softball team. And then baseball analogies for dating, for life advice, knock the ball out of the park as an analogy, folklore. analogy, and it's only relevant and interesting as long as baseball is popular. As soon as baseball, so for in the environment where baseball is a staple, that is valuable. But if you say knock the ball out of the park to somebody who doesn't even know how baseball is played, your analogy is going to fall on deaf ears, and you're not going to communicate the value of it. The first, the different bases, you have to get to base 1, 2, and 3. The step, which in that analogy is the steps towards the process. Biblically, that you have information that transcends time. So I would say the small minor variations would be what the baseball analogy is. Baseball is a sport happened over time. It works in a certain environment for a certain group of people, the people who play baseball maybe, the people who in a community and the culture where baseball is popular in that environment. Whereas the biblical, so that's it's a sub of the overall cultural organism. The overall cultural organism. Not every member of, so they'd be the different variations of birds, the different colors of bird, say. You have, and then you have your, all the birds that eat seeds, and they have their different strategies. So you have your goldfinch and your, maybe two different, very similar birds, species, that they use slightly different strategies. Maybe they eat the same food, and they have different levels of success. And you know the environments where certain ones outcompete others. Well, the bird that competes in every environment, the strategy set that is most valuable to all who follow it would be ancient wisdom. And that goes for popular old books. I personally enjoy old books more than new books. I consider a 2,000-year-old book to have more value than a 50-year-old book or a 20-year-old book. It stood the test of time. Natural selection has led to some success, enough that it has survived, and not only survived in popularity. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not as popular. Well, it's popular because of how old it is. Say, Xenophon's Anabasis. It's a good book. It's quite fascinating, but it's not as popular as Plato's Republic. Plato's Republic has more wisdom that led to more individual and group success. The Stoics are built on it. Our culture is built on the back of some of the wisdom in Plato's Republic, and that's a fundamental value here. When you look at the evolution of ancient wisdom and the grounds, so Plato's Republic, if you were to compare it to current culture and maybe current philosophy, it would be like the fossil, studying the fossil record, if you were to compare it into a hyper-analytical fashion. But even on the base fact that it led to some people more success as a book, it is probably more valuable and has more wisdom and is more useful to recommend and entertain yourself with than any book off the shelf. Now, Pliny the Elder is also another old one, and I like what he said on the topic of books. There's no book so bad that you can't get some good out of it. It's you shoot for a target often enough, eventually you get good at hitting the center. You may. So that's a general rule for all things. Anyone who's doing anything, they do get better at getting, whatever their method is, better at getting closer to the mark and doing what they wanted. A psychologist may be operating with 90% of the information he's taken in and read being unreplicatable and not scientific. It may be all pseudoscience, but the methodology, they get closer to hitting the mark. They do help people because they're trying to help people. It's the over time evolution. Those who help people more obviously were more popular, and so there is, even if it's not right, even if the wisdom is not technically accurate, it still has some value to be found in it. And I would say the Bible itself, just based on the vast popularity and how ancient the wisdom, how much this is how you structure society around. This is the core documentation of everyone's culture. I mean, every religious group, like if you go back to the Egyptians, they have their different religions. To them, that was core to their being, and there is a severe amount of value to be gained out of that. That is more valuable than Plato's Republic. The Bible is insurmountably more valuable. That is, and you shouldn't toss it out the window just because it's top tier value. Now, you can look at what psychologists have studied and say it's like the goal is to hit the center of the target. You could use a bow and arrow. You could throw it. You could simply throw whatever you're trying to get. Yes, the throwing motion, you can get it. It might not be as you have to get really close to the target. Maybe that means you train so much, but you only have a limited range of ability to hit your target. With a better tool, with the superior tool, you can get further away. This is me using analogies, even though they're not technically accurate. Technically, I'm not speaking to the explanative power and details of how the brain works. Although this analogy is essentially explaining why the accuracy does have value, the better tools have value. Maybe not the technical details explaining it, but the technical details do add value. So understanding how that rock flies through the air, you might make an arrow, a bow and arrow. You can stand further away, or with more scientific extreme description, you can still hitting that target. The goal is to manage to compete with other people. We use science to produce a better tool to do our goal, but the goal remains the same. The environment is the same from here to there. And the oldest tool that evolved alongside us, it's like using a dog to herd sheep versus, you could make a robot to do it, or you could set up the environment, but you need full control over the environment. We do not have full control over the expanding complexity of humans and groups. So better tools for the job is the best tool. And the oldest tool, not necessarily the best tool, but the most popular tool is probably one of the best tools, and currently the most popular tool for cultural order. Even if it's not technically accurate, it still has far more wisdom, is biblical work. I'm going to go for a couple more minutes. Yeah, biblical work. And even technically, the wisdom is so valuable that ancient wisdom does provide value. If you were to, I just had a loss of thought. The ancient value of the wisdom. The golden rule. The golden rule. Do unto others as we have done unto yourself. It's such a valuable piece of order for yourself to get along as an individual and group, that if you use the golden rule to act out life, you are effectively using game theory. Game theory we discovered about, it's hard to say. At the very least, written down, the golden rule is 2,000 years old, give or take half a century. So this wisdom is so valuable that we wrote it down and used it to structure society. And we recognize mathematically the same wisdom in game theory, and we describe it technically. So it's so valuable that it presented itself to us in ancient times. Okay, that's how long I'll go for that one. Ooh, I'm not sure if I'll take a break. I'm not sure how much longer I'll go. And that's the first topic down. The first topic being, I opened up the wrong window. My first topic, the evolution of ancient wisdom. How to develop habits and change behavior. The next topic. This is kind of relevant. I really like this document. It's a good piece of advice. The Instructions of Tao Kedi, the Satire of the Trades. beginning of the teaching of the man Djar, called Dalkadi, for his son, called Pepi. It was while he was sailing south to the residential presidential place. Him in that's error. It was while he was sailing south to the residence to place him in the writing school among the children of officials, of the foremost of the residents. He said to him, I have seen violent beatings, so direct your heart to writing. I have witnessed a man seized for his labor. Look, nothing excels writing. It is like a loyal man. Read for yourself the end of the compilation, and you can find this phrase in it saying, describe whatever his place at the residence, he cannot be poor in it. He accomplishes the wish of another when he is not succeeding. I do not see a profession like it that you could say that phrase for. So I would have you love writing more than your mother, and have you recognize its beauty, for it is gathered greater than any profession. There is none like it on earth. He has just begun growing, and is just a child. We people will greet him already. He will be sent to carry out a mission, and before he returns, he is clothed in linen, like an adult man. I do not see a sculptor on a mission, or a goldsmith on the task of being dispatched, but I see the coppersmith, at his toil at the mouth of his furnace, his fingers like crocodile's skin, his stench worse than fish eggs. The jeweler drills in bead making using all of the hardest hard stones. When he has completed the inlays, his arms are destroyed by his exhaustion. He sits at the foot of Ra, with his knees and back hunched double. The barber shaves into the end of the evening continually at the call, continually on his elbow, pushing himself continually from street to street, looking for people to shave. He does violence to his arms to fill his belly, like bees that eat at their toil. The reed cutter sails north to the marshes to take for himself the shafts. When he has exceeded the power of his arms in action, when the mosquitoes have slaughtered him and the gnats have cut him down too, then he is broken in two. The small potter is under his earth, even when he is stood among the living. He is muddier with clay than swine to burn under his earth. His clothes are solid as a block, and his headcloth is rags, until the air enters his nose, coming from his furnace direct. When he has made the pestle out of his leg, the pounding is done with himself, smearing the fences of every house, and beaten by his streets. Let me tell you what it is like to be a bricklayer, the bitterness of the taste. He has to exist outside in the wind, building in his kilt. His robes a cord from the weaving house stretching around his back. His arms are destroyed by hard labor. Mixed in with all his filth, he eats the bread with his fingers, though he can only wash them once. For the carpenter, with his chisel, is utterly vile, covering the roof in a chamber, measuring 10 cubits by 6 to cover the roof in a month. After laying the boards with cord of the weaving house, all the work on it is done, but the food given for it couldn't stretch to his children. The gardener has to carry a rod, and all his shoulder bones ache, and there is a great blister on his neck, oozing pus. He spends his morning drenching leeks, his evening in the mire he has spent over day. After his belly is feeling bad, so it happens that he rests dead to his name, aged more than any other profession. The field laborer complains eternally. His voice rises higher than the birds, with his fingers turned into sores from carrying overloads of produce. He is too exhausted to report for march work, and has to exist in rags. His health is in health on new lands. Sickness is his reward. His state work there is whatever they have forgotten. If he can ever escape from there, he reaches his home in utter poverty, downtrodden, too much to walk. The mat weaver lives inside the weaving house. He is worse off than a woman, with his knees up to his stomach, unable to breathe in any air. If he wastes any daytime not weaving, he is beaten with 50 lashes. He has to give a sum to the doorkeeper to be allowed to go out to the light of day. The weapon maker is denigrated utterly, going out to the hill, and what ye give to his ass is greater than the work that results, and great is his gift to the man in the country who puts him on the track. He reaches his home in the evening, and traveling has broken him in two. The trader goes out to the hill land after bequeathing his good to his children, fearful of lions and Asiatics. He recognizes himself again. When he is in Egypt, he reaches his home in the evening, and traveling has broken him in two. His house is of cloth for bricks, without experiencing any pleasure. The stony worker, his fingers are rotted, the smell of them is as corpses, and his eyes are wasted by the mass of flame. He can never be rid of the sin, spending his day cut by the reed. His own clothing is his horror. The sandal maker is utterly the worst off, with his stocks of more than oil. His health is corpses, and he bites into his skins. The washerman does the laundry on the shore neighbor to the crocodiles. Father is going to the water of the canal, he says to his son and his daughter. Is this not a profession to be glad for, more choice than any other profession? The food is mixed with places of filth, and there is no pure limb on him. He puts on the clothing of a woman who was in her menstruation. Weep for him. Spending the day with the washing rod, with the cleaning stone upon him, he is told, dirty washbowl, come here. The fringes are still to be done. The bird catcher is the most utterly miserable. He is more miserable than any other profession. His toil is on the river, mixed in with the crocodiles. When the collection of his dues takes place, then he is always in lament. He can never be told, there are crocodiles surfacing. His fear has blinded him. If he goes out, it is on the water of the canal. He is as at a miracle. Look, there is no profession free of directors except the scribe. He is the director. If, though, you know how to write, that is better life for you than these professions I show you. Protector of the worker, or who his wretch the worker. The field labor of a man cannot say to him, do not watch over me. Look, the trouble of sailing south to the residence. Look, it is trouble for love of you. A day in the school chamber is more useful for you than an eternity of its toil in the mountains. It is the fast way I show you. Or should I inspire desire for being woken at dawn to be bruised? Let me tell you in another manner, do not come too close in good bearing. If you enter when the lord of the house is at home, and his arms are extended to another before you, you are to be seated with your hand on your mouth. Do not request anything beside him, but react to him when addressed, and avoid joining the table. If you are walking behind officials, do not come close in good bearing. If you enter when the lord of the house is at home, and his arms are extended to another before you, you are to be seated with your hand on your mouth. Do not request anything besides him, but react to him when addressed, and avoid joining the table. Be serious with anyone greater in dignity. Do not speak matters of secrecy, for the secretive is the one who can shield himself. Do not speak matters of boasting, but take your seat with the reliable. If you come out from the school chamber when you have been told the midday hour for coming and going in the streets, debate for yourself the end of the place. If an official sends you on a mission, say it exactly as he says it, without omission, without adding to it. Whoever leaves out the declamation, his name shall not endure. Whoever completes with all his talent, nothing will be kept back from him. He will not be parted from all his places. Do not tell lies against a mother. That is the extreme for the officials. It has happened. His arms are mustered, and the heart has made him weak. Do not add to it with meekness. That is worse for the belly. When you have heard, if bread satisfies you, and drinking 2 jars of beer, there is no limit for the belly one would fight for. If another is satisfied standing up, avoid joining the table. Look, you send out the throng. You hear the words of officials. Behave, then, like the children of important people. When you are going to collect them, the scribe is the one seen hearing cases. Would fighters be the ones to hear? Fight words that are contrary. Move fast when you are proceeding. Your heart should never trust. Keep to the paths for it. The friends of a man are your troops. Look, abundance is on the path of the God, and abundance is written on his shoulder on the day of his birth. He reaches the palace portal, and that court of officials is the beckoning people to him. Look, no scribe will ever be lacking in food, or the things of the house of the king. May he live, prosper, and be well. Meskenet is the prosperity of the scribe, the one placed before the court officials. Thank God for the father and for your mother, you who are placed on the path of the living. See what I have set out before you, and for the children of your children. This is its end, perfect in harmony. Well, that's the satire of the trades. Oof, powerful document. That document may have alone convinced me to become a writer. Learn to write. Learn to communicate. It's learning to communicate, and I guess the value of learning itself, more complex tasks. It's a document on literacy. Back then, I'm sure there were plenty of leaders who themselves weren't literate, although those who were literate and able to communicate themselves probably outcompeted the others pretty quick. And it's the satire of the trades. All the trades, you toil your labor and have nothing for it, except writing. Writing, going to school. I mean, just reading it there may have convinced me to go back to school. That my mind was running and racing, and law back then, the way they described the scribes, it's like they are lawyers. They are the first. In Rome, you would call them orators, the ones who know the law, who help you represent yourself. Traditionally, we studied in school only three things. You could only go to university for law, theology, or medicine. So you could become a doctor, a lawyer, or a priest. Those were the only things you used to go to school for. University. Now it's grown, and I'm not sure if what it's grown to is even stable. It's too recent to tell. We haven't had the test of time on this one. Definitely is proved out. Law is definitely something to be valued. All other things that are taught in schools used to be taught by your employer. I'm sure there were some trade schools at some point, but ultimately, any other profession could be taught by your professors, your employers on the work site. A carpenter could learn to become an engineer from an engineer. That's the traditional way of things. So, the satire of the trades, and that's my topic: how to develop habits and change behavior. Well, what's a good place to start? My actual book recommendation for this topic is Starting Strength. The methodology is refined on the physical adaptation, because it's for strength, but it's how to maximize efficiency in developing strength and adaptive potential. You don't want to overdo it. You want to stress your system, but not strain your system. A strain you have to heal from, a stress you can adapt to. So you want to add new stress to the system, more and more stress every time, and give yourself time to adapt to the stress and heal, but you don't want to push a strain you want to maximize the stress time so you want to add new stress as soon as you've healed, but you don't want to overstress so that healing time is too long, and you don't want to overstress to the point of strain. There's a balancing act. So I would recommend writing. Learn to write and learn to speak, communicate. They don't teach you that in school. I know they teach you literacy. They teach you technically how to write, but they don't teach you how to write anymore. There's a set of writing exercises called the Progymnasica, and it is how to actually write. It's 12 writing exercises. I might have to cover that next time now that I've done the satire of the trades. But you definitely want to learn how to communicate, learn how to obey, be attentive to the needs of your friends, be attentive to your own needs. and I think it's especially a warning against developing skills that you labor and destroy yourself with. You develop the ability to communicate, to write, to live off of writing as a trade, not just learning to literacy so you can write, but learning how to live off of your writing, your ability to write technical documents. The last thing I properly fully wrote was on a whim, was a technical document for people who are completely technologically illiterate. The type of person who I've helped set something up, who asked me questions every step of the way, and it was just super simple for anyone technically literate. Just a simple manual set up Discord, and it's knowing your audience is a lot of it. But, learn to write. That's definitely that one. And the value of writing, the value, all the other trades mentioned in the satire of the trades, the toil and you get tired at the end of the day. Even the merchant, at the end of the day, away from home, tired, they spend all their money to have a nice home, but they are never there to enjoy it. And I think that speaks a lot to a lot of the business side of the world today that have branched off from writing and analysis and this stuff. So yeah, pick a trade, learn a trade. It's always good advice, and I think the trade to learn is writing. I don't think there's any other trade that compares to it. Let's start the next one. We're doing good today. Kind of ad hoc in this. I just have to open it up on my screen. The next one. What topic is this for? How to ask, lead, speak versus listen. Oh yeah, so yeah, this is how to lead, how to ask questions, and I'm starting with this one. I brought it up in a comment somewhere because it's about honor and loyalty and the causes of corrupt eloquence is just it spoke when I saw somebody who's just followed a path and trusted the wrong people and has the wrong is touting certain ideas. So yeah, let's read this one next. A dialogue concerning oratory, or the causes of corrupt eloquence. Let's see how this one's a lot longer. I might have to do this in multiple sessions. You have inquired of me, my good friend, Justus Fabius, how and from what causes it has proceeded, that while ancient times display a race of great and splendid orators, the present age, dispirited and without any claim to the praise of eloquence, has scarcely retained the name of an orator. By the appellation we now distinguish none but those who flourished in a former period. To the eminent of the present day we give the title of speakers, pleaders, advocates, patrons, in short, everything but orators. The inquiry is in its nature dialectic, tending, if we are not able to contend with antiquity, to impeach our genius, and if we are not willing to range our judgment, an answer to so nice a question is more than I should venture to undertake. You know what? Whoops. Just thinking it might be a good idea to take a break here. I have my audio. You know, this is an endurance screen, so. You know what I've done too? I'm not up to the hour mark I was at yesterday. I think I'll save this for next time. I can't remember really what I was talking about last time. Discussing things. Well, we'll do 15 minutes of just general discussion. I hear audio in the background and it's got me thinking. Bringing back this habit of recording is not a bad idea. eloquence. Yeah, they don't teach a lot of things in school these days. I'm just trying to get into the habit of presenting something, doing something with my time, my day. This is on the same idea of the satire of the trades. I'm writing a manual based on how to develop yourself and become productive. This is the start of a more complex formation of, I guess, an idea I've had. My habit is to start at the ends. Extremely simple, and I stay and extremely complex. And I can imagine the most complex structure. Social, whatever structure. But how to build up from the simple to that structure. Like I can analyze a rock and look at it and think about it, think gold. And I know there's gold in that. But I don't think the full process of how to get up to the structure. I can think of something you could build, like a table. Think of building a table. I can look at a spot, but I never process of building it, or I could start sawing wood and playing with wood, but never exercising that all the way up to the point. The table is super simple. That's too simple. I would think of the whole living room, right? The organization of the room, where to put the table for efficiency, for view, for aesthetic. And I wouldn't think about the getting from A to B. You have to learn to order your mind, order your thoughts, learn to speak, learn to lead, learn to ask for what you need. I was talking and I was told from somebody who's insisted on doing things for me that I really appreciated and need done. Like, help me when I needed it. And he said, "You have not because you ask not." It's a piece of ancient wisdom that I really like. You have not because you ask not. I guess I can touch on the other topics and think about them a little bit. Starting strength. Oh, yeah, the next one. How to speak, ask, lead. Corrupt order, the oratory. It's interesting, the documents. The first one, the origin of speech, is extremely deep, will take me a really long time. And really, it was just that I didn't think of anything else to use. And the next two, I thought of something else from the one I recommended. I don't want to use starting strength because it's newer, and I'm not sure it's outside of copyright. I don't have permission. I can recommend it, and I want to recommend it to support them. And I thought of the satire of the trades, and it's perfect. It fits. It does fit. How to develop habits and change behavior. Well, what habit do you develop? Good reasoning why to develop a habit, why you want to become productive. Like, I have 10 topics. The idea is eventually to get to a serious time. How to ask, lead, speak. Corrupt oratory, causes. Okay, so that's what's breaking things down, what's causing breakdown of such things. My book is Plato's Republic, and that's basically just how to think. It's a philosophy on how to, not just an analysis of the world, and definitely it goes, pants are falling down, it goes quite far to be able to think. Well, I guess if I get to the hour point, including the other stream, I'm an hour and 10 minutes. So I just need to go for 5 more minutes, and technically I'm pushing my endurance. I mean, go until failure, it's the idea of endurance. But I'm feeling close to that failure, so now I'm pushing it past. I really should be pulling myself back. I know if I really pushed it, I could go quite a bit further. And this is definitely the limit of my comfort. How to ask, lead, and speak versus listen. Corrupt eloquence. I have another book ready. American etiquette. That's simple for etiquette. I don't have anything else for etiquette. Etiquette is more powerful than law. So that one and the